Welcome to the Hugging Face versus OpenAI episode of Using AI, the podcast where we discuss how individuals and organizations are actually using AI and how they think about this space. I'm your host, Alex Denne, and I'm joined by senior ML research scientist Alex Papadopoulos-Korfiatis and AI startup founder and CTO Nitish Mutha. Welcome back, both again. Lovely to have you.
Hello, both again. Lovely to be here.
It's great to be here.
All right, now Hugging Face. I mean, we took the mick a little bit about llama as a name, but Hugging Face has to take the biscuit, surely. Like, it's ridiculous. Why is it called Hugging Face?
That's a good question. That's a great question. And there's an emoji associated with it, right? So whenever they mention the company name or whatever, like a library name, they also have that emoji. They don't just say Hugging Face. It's like that emoji rather than it's like with hands like that. I think there's a good representation of that emoji on your background, Alex.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit like an in-joke that has gotten a bit out of hand. It's a total tangent here, but I went to Iceland and did some cycling a few years ago, and their big supermarket is a bit like a Lidl or an Aldi in the way that it feels, but it has this giant pig that is a sort of a money bank, right, a piggy bank, as the logo, and the pig is cross-eyed and just looks genuinely deranged. And it's now the most popular supermarket in Iceland, and the logo is just hideous. And I think Hugging Face has got to be, similarly silly. And I like that they do put the Hugging Face emoji all over the site. It is quite warm for something that others would find quite a scary subject. Yes, my image background is 19th century Japanese adaptation of the Hugging Face emoji, and I do think it suits the Japanese style.
There's also a joke about this name of company. Like, I think one of the joke the founders say is like when they go public, they want the company to be represented with an emoji rather than a name, three-letter character name. So probably.
I thought you were going to say they were going to change it to being money bags.
Yeah, I think looking it up now, they picked the name because of the emoji. So the emoji is the name of the company, not the actual Hugging Face name.
Okay, so Hugging Face, it's an emoji, but it's also now a big player in the AI space. Would one of you be able to take us through it a little bit?
Just to clarify though, from the start of this episode, Alex, I don't like the versus in this episode title because we're talking about two very, very different things. So Hugging Face is not a language model. It's a tool around language models, and Hugging Face now has their language model as well that maybe we can talk about, and maybe that can be a versus, but that's just a small thing of a small part of what they're doing. So quick history, I guess. Hugging Face was founded in 2016 by French founders, but in New York City, so like French-American company. They've gotten 4 series of funding so far, with the latest one being 3.5 millions, and they have valuation of 4.5 billions, which is like the pretty big company. And in general, what they're doing is, or at least what they were doing for most of their existence, was open sourcing ML tools. And the main claim to fame, I guess, was the Transformers library. That is a Python library that allows you to. It's a repository of a lot of tools around machine learning and language models, but not only language models, other kinds of machine learning models as well. So for a very long time, and still, it was the one-stop shop, I guess, as a machine learning researcher or engineer. If you want to run something on your computer, if you want to fine-tune a model, run a model locally, or do anything with models, then you use the Transformers library. So it's the de facto standard for running machine learning models. And that was a major win because before that, everything was very fragmented. There were a lot of toolkits, a lot of libraries, but Hugging Face took everything and put it in a single repository, easy to use, kind of standardized, very good documentation, making it a lot easier to do our job as machine learning scientists and engineers. And
Sorry, just a quick question. So I'm sort of thinking it's a little bit like GitHub for AI models, training sets, and obviously, but GitHub, it's sort of clear like how they make money, I suppose. I mean, they're a SaaS company. I think they're owned by Microsoft now. So a lot of the data that they do is what's interesting. But can anyone, like, could I take, say, off the shelf Llama, fine tune it, and then re-upload it to Hugging Face as, like, Alex Denne's AI model, and
yes,
people could just download it and use it? Is that sort of how it works?
It is, but that is a different thing from what I mentioned, which is the Transformers library. I guess that a better analogy would be in GitHub, you have GitHub, the platform, and you have Git, the technology that GitHub is built on top of. But there's other Git providers, or you don't need even a provider. You can just run a Git server locally, for example. So the Transformers library would be more similar to Git, or more similar to, I don't know, not as wide as that, but to Python as a programming language, right? So it's a library with code for Python that you can just use to build your products, but not a website or a centralized repository. Hugging Face does have that though, and that's also pretty popular, but that came later, and they call it the model hub, right? So they provide a space where you can, like GitHub, upload your own models, and all of the popular open source models are now on there. So Llama 2 is on there, and everything else is on there. So you can go and download the model from there, use the Transformers library to run it, maybe use the Transformers library to also fine tune it, and then re-upload it there as your Alex Den model. So that's a second very popular product that they have, the Model Hub, but that's more recent. About how they make money, I'm not completely sure. So the Model Hub is in general free. The Transformers library, they cannot make money off that, I guess, although it's widely used. I assume that most companies doing anything with AI or machine learning are actually using Transformers library. But they have some paid for features now, right? And maybe that's a way they make money.
Yeah, I had a look into that recently, the pricing page, and I think they provide like some form of like fully managed services on top of these models. So let's say, as very early days, you found a model by Hugging Face, you're interested in it, you try to tinker with it, play with it, and maybe fine tune the model. But one fine day, then you want to probably build a product around it and start hosting it. So that's where I think their pricing comes in, where now that you're into that ecosystem, you could easily use their hardware access. So they do provide a hardware where you can deploy these models, and also something called inference endpoints, where you could just pay by the amount of inference you're doing on that model, hosted model, or via them. So monthly, hourly payments, they charge hourly on the inference endpoints. So again, it's quite handy in that sense, because if you happen to use a model which is deployed on Hugging Face, or you found by Hugging Face, it's an easy direction to productionize it and probably just deploy it, and without very low amount of technical effort. So I guess, yeah, that's where they are kind of starting to monetize this, apart from just having a pro account. Yeah.
So in a way, that would be a competitor to AWS, let's say, or a Google Cloud platform where you can deploy your models. But because the models you will deploy on Google Cloud platform, you'll probably get them from Hugging Face. That's what they're banking on, I guess, that it's easier to just stay on Hugging Face and do everything on Hugging Face.
Yeah, I think so. Because again, I think if you were to deploy whole self-host your own model, then I think it's a lot of painful work to figure out. There's not yet a streamlined, well-thought ecosystem around it. So I think probably that's where Hugging Face is trying to get at, like get all the free open source models and then try to make them production ready or close to production so that someone can actually use in products.
It feels to me, and I've just been reading an interesting Hacker News post on Hugging Face that happened when they raised the most recent Series D round. One take is that they're basically being incredibly kind to their users because they're Silicon Valley funded and they don't have to worry desperately about revenue yet. They're effectively trying to build a bit of a monopoly on model hosting. And it looks like there's actually, I know we were using GitHub as an analogy, but some of the people commenting on that are saying that half of the models that they use, they can find on GitHub and they don't need to go to Hugging Face. Which is quite interesting. So others, there's a couple of people who created throwaway accounts. I'll put the link in the show notes because it is quite interesting. And they basically said they're a long way from product market fit, which happens, right? It's a new space, so it's hard to have product market fit immediately because a lot of people are still figuring out how the space is going to look. Is there a particular part of Hugging Face that you guys think is quite compelling that they have cornered? I know you've said sort of like one-stop shop, but open source as a moat isn't necessarily the most strong way to create a defensible business. So I wonder if you think, what's like the biggest or most defensible thing about Hugging Face at the moment? Would it be the community? Because it's pretty large, isn't it? Is there anything out there that's comparable? GitHub is everything plus some AI, whereas Hugging Face is obviously just, ML AI.
It's a good question. I cannot think of anything except the community and the fact that pretty much all of the models are on there. So it makes sense to just stay on there and do your inference, for example, there as well. So what we mentioned before, but that's not the greatest of modes, is it?
Yeah, probably that's what they're banking on, like how they could probably convert this shining on me, how they could convert their existing user base into a paid product. But yeah, I think the most compelling feature so far I see about Hugging Face is just the community, access to community, or being able to share launch your model on Hugging Face and the amount of distribution they've got. So I think that community probably is the strength of Hugging Face at the moment, or that's how I perceive Hugging Face at the moment. And trying out those various models without need to locally install anything, just try out various models. So it's quite a show and tell sort of platform where you can just deploy a model in the cloud and share it with everyone else, and people can try and give you feedback, and that sort of community engagement. I'm sure there's more to it, but that's what gets highlighted in my mind.
And it seems like, as is true for many of the AI companies that have raised, multi-billion valuations, much of their investment comes from the cloud services companies that they end up then spending on. So, I think the names that have invested in Hugging Face are more impressive than almost any other. You've got NVIDIA, Salesforce, Microsoft, IBM, Google. There's heaps that I haven't even mentioned that are all big names in the space. It's sort of like everyone loves them. So the Hugging Face feel is clearly working for them. It's interesting though the multiple, the revenue multiple of the valuation is actually higher than it is for Anthropic and for OpenAI. And given that we feel that the moat is lower or smaller for Hugging Face, I'm really curious. It feels like there's something I don't quite understand about it. And just another thought is that when I'm browsing it, the idea of there being 500,000 AI models shared on Hugging Face just feels so overwhelming. Where do you start? How do you rate which models are good and which ones aren't? Is there any sort of like automated way of doing that? Can I see the best model for my use case on Hugging Face? Because that sounds valuable. Is that a thing they offer?
So they do, yeah. They have leaderboards, so you could go like there's several on Hugging Face machine learning model categories. Like for example, you have your image classification, you have your language models, you have your sentiment analysis models, and then for each of those, there's a leaderboard and automated tests that rank the models available on Hugging Face according to that. So you in practice just go on there, look at the top models, and then just click through and just see those in Hugging Face. Test them out online as well now. So they offer these kinds of features where you can try them out without any code, without installing anything. You just try them out online to see what kind of response they give and whether it's worth investing your time to actually download and run them locally. So they do offer features like that, but still that's not a moat and that's not easily monetizable, right?
I think the one way they're probably trying to experiment to monetize is adding a pro account on that level of library access. So there's now a lot of content in terms of model dataset content you have, and a huge dictionary of or library of all of these things. Now I think they're trying to sell this pro account where you could have higher, like on a free account, you have limited access, like limited inference access, limited model size, what sort of size of model you can upload. And then if they have successfully built an ecosystem where people who want to share their model with the world, and if the model is big, then probably they have to go on pro account and then only they can upload it. So I think probably they're kind of monetizing the community itself with the pro account with special access to some special features. And I think the features like trying out a model before downloading it all is really compelling, because what if, like, let's say I want to build some model, let's say on music composition, and there are several models on Hugging Face. I want to try them out. It's just so fast and time efficient for me to just try them out on Hugging Face. So I wonder if that becomes a paid feature very soon.
Looking into it again, I think that there's a very good analogy here with GitHub, right? Because GitHub also offers a massively popular free service. And they then make their money off companies also using GitHub because they're ubiquitous, and then you have to pay for features like SSO, like better audit capabilities, better security, and Hugging Face is doing the same. So there's a pretty good analogy here of thinking them of like the GitHub of machine learning models. For free users, then it's free and it's a great product and used by research. And then when some of those researchers go work in a company and build something, they still want to use Hugging Face. But then because it's lacking the security features that the company would need, you have to pay for a premium Hugging Face account. Maybe that's the business model here. And that does sound valid to me.
Well, it sounds like they have, or they had in August. So what's that? 5 months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, 10,000 paying customers, delivering 30 million ARR, which is impressive. It does seem to be mostly compute related. Also, a slight tangent, but they happen to have other things we haven't even mentioned, like a papers library. And yeah, I think it seems to be a little bit of a discombobulated mess. Some people are saying it looks like it's run by researchers rather than sort of business strategists, which is quite an interesting approach. But getting back to your point, yeah, interested to hear more. I love the use case as well. The idea of you have a specific use, you go to Hugging Face, you find the right model, you try before you buy, you pay for a little bit of the compute as you're trying. Like that does sound like a very compelling use case for someone who is able to do that. Presumably, you can't really use Hugging Face if you are low or no code.
I think you can for up until the point where you need to download something and run it locally. The models space that they have just allows you to click into models and try them out, right? So you don't need to write any code to do that.
Also, that's what I think the inference product feature does, probably. I have to look more deeper into it, but by the sound of it, what it looks like is like any model which is uploaded to Hugging Face in their spaces could potentially just run the inferences in no-code fashion just by paying for it.
Like I mentioned in the previous episode, I was quite disappointed to find out that there's no official Llama 2 playground on Hugging Face. There's for many other models, but not for Llama 2. Although I did manage to find one in the end, but I'm not completely sure if it was official.
Do effectively all of the companies who produce large language models and want as much feedback as possible, do they tend to upload their models to Hugging Face?
I would say that yes. I don't know if any that doesn't upload their models to Hugging Face. NVIDIA wasn't for a while. They had their own kind of little ecosystem of models and code and how to run them. But now they do as well.
It must be loved by researchers as well. I think you mentioned the model hub, but I think you wanted to mention something about researchers. Did you get onto that point? The Bloom model?
Yeah. So that's another great point, right? So, and here is where there might be an actual versus or comparison with ChatGPT or Llama. So Hugging Face developed their own language model, but was done in a very Hugging Face open source way, where a team of researchers from all around the world just got together and spent a year together and collaborated on developing this model called Bloom. Don't remember what Bloom stands for, but I have the impression that there will be kind of a multilingual aspect in the acronym.
It's big science, which is the B, so that's a little bit forced because Bloom doesn't work. So big science, large, open science, open access, multilingual language model. You can see why they shorten it to Bloom.
Yes. So Big Science is like the name of this cooperative they put together, I guess, of scientists from all around the world that collaborated on developing the Bloom model. And I think they trained it on a French supercomputer between 2001 and 2002 and released it publicly as an open source model. That said, that was from 2022, and the model is quite dated now. So I don't think like for output quality, there's any kind of comparison to more modern models like GPT 3.5, GPT 4, or even Llama 2. But it was a very interesting science experiment, I guess. Can you build a model that competes with the then popular models by just bringing people together and getting them to work on a common goal. And it kind of worked, but the fact that there's no Bloom 2 means that it did not totally work, I guess.
Very cool project. Well, I can't imagine having 1,000 researchers in the same building for a year, all working on the same
They were
thing.
probably not in the same building, and so they were probably not only working on that, right? But it was the side project, I guess, for everyone.
So how do we feel about Hugging Face? Do you get the warm feels from it that the emoji gives off? Does it feel more welcoming or more cluttered? You know, how does your overall experience of Hugging Face compare to some of the other tools out there? And do you think it deserves the valuation?
I love them. As a machine learning scientist and engineer, I don't know what I would do without them. And I've used them probably more than anything else in the last 6-7 years that I've been working this in this space. That said, whether they deserve their valuation or not, I don't know, because I'm not completely sure, as we discussed, of what their monetization strategy is and whether they've found their product market fit. But I do love them.
Yeah, I think based on what our discussion, I do feel like they are having a good product here, because the kind of doing is like a community-led library of all of the models, keeping them organized, and providing a platform where people can launch different models. And then from that point to connect to productions, like how in a no-code fashion as well, like how people can just discover model to actually start using the model in their products. And I think more development they have in their whole ecosystem, I think this could be a really good ecosystem where, yeah, all the open source models, then you could actually start using into product, in your own product, without need to go through all of that DevOps and or MLOps operations. So maybe they can own the space of MLOps and automate all of that. And the creator of the model, the people who submit models, they do all the configuration and you just have to then use it. So it could be a good library of models.
So I'm going to ask a very silly question, and I know it's a silly question. Let's say hypothetically you become stranded on a desert island. See what I did there? And you can choose either all of Hugging Face or a completely unlimited, all access OpenAI, GPT-4, the datasets, the works, right? You get to choose between everything on Hugging Face or OpenAI. What do you choose?
It's a bit of a trick question, because right now OpenAI is good at quality, but I think it does a few things really well. But I think with Hugging Face, you have wide range of smaller applications. You have like music generation, you have video generation, you have got artwork generation, then text generation. So there are a lot of smaller, probably low quality, but a lot of diverse. There is high diversity of things there. And then based on Hugging Face kind of roadmap, looks like all of those models could be easy to use in the end in product. So maybe I might bet more on Hugging Face, especially because they're on open source. So in long run, probably might surpass or the diversity they are able to attract.
Yeah, one thing that complicates, I don't know how to answer, and one thing that complicates this is that foundation models, the likes of GPT-4, Anthropic, Claude 2, are now so good at tasks that they haven't been trained for, that they've kind of replaced smaller models as well. So before those foundation models, you needed to, for a specific task, to go and find the model that's been fine-tuned on your task, and then it would be a lot better than the generalist models, right? But what we've seen with the big models of the size of GPT 3.5 or 4 is that suddenly they're better than the smaller models at those specific tasks as well. So for anything that involves text, I would take GPT-4 over any kind of army of smaller models that might be more specialized for specific tasks. That said, I really like Nitish's point of other modalities, for example, music generation, video, audio. GPT-4 now has image capabilities as well, right? But that's different from music generation, for example, or text to speech or speech text. So there's still a lot more diversity in a snapshot of Hugging Face as compared to just GPT-4 unlimited access. So if my task was not a purely textual task, I would still pick Hugging Face as well, but not sure for how long, because I would pick a good generalist model over small specialized models at this point.
Super interesting.
That was a great question, Alex. Well done.
Yes, thought it was silly. Great answers. I think you raise an excellent subject that could probably be the subject of a whole episode, which would be how does this happen, right? How do these generalist models end up outperforming specialist models at the task that the specialist model was designed for? I think it is super interesting, the emergent capabilities of these models. And to be honest, that could be a really big strategic risk to Hugging Face. If one mega model outperforms all of its 500,000 AI models that have been submitted to the platform, what does that say about the future of a company like Hugging Face? It's a new ecosystem and a rising tide lifts all boats, and there'll be room for both, of course. And it sounds like they have their fingers in many pies. So whatever happens, they'll have some product that some people will be using. But yeah, any closing thoughts from the two of you? I don't think I know enough
they
about
also
Hugging Face
have
to
generalist
choose.
models, right? They have Llama 2, for example, on Hugging Face. So it doesn't mean that they cannot have big models that can handle everything as well.
Yes, but will the best model in the world be on Hugging Face? Probably not, because you'll pay for it directly, right?
Yeah, I think that's my summary. I think Hugging Face is really good for kind of exploration and innovation. So I think it really helps people to innovate and explore and identify new use cases. So it's good for discovery. And eventually that becomes a feature inside a big model. So yeah, I think that's where Hugging Face sits at the moment.
All right, well, I'm going to abstain. And it feels like you've both sort of gone Hugging Face for a lot of things. But actually, if you just need to do something very high quality, then you'd probably lean towards OpenAI's tools as of today, which is a little bit of a half and half answer, but I'm going to let you off because it's not really a fair versus. But yes, thank you both. Until next time, it was a good one.
Ciao.
Bye.